Afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here for our Civility and Leadership in Politics session. My name is Chris McDonald. I'm the VACO Director at Government Relations. Really pleased to be with y'all here today. I know it's been a long day with a lot of material, so really awesome to see how many people are in this crowd to discuss something really important. As we all know, over the last really many years, last couple of election cycles, a lot of bitterness and caustic attitudes have creeped into the political world, and even into our own Virginia way. So we're really lucky here today to have two speakers who really kind of exemplify civility in politics, despite kind of the national atmosphere right now. I'll briefly introduce both of them as they both really don't need much of an introduction. I think everyone here pretty much knows it. First up, we have Delegate Terry Kilgore. Delegate Kilgore has been a member of the House of Delegates, representing the citizens of the 1st Legislative District since he was first elected in 1993. As delegate, Terry represents Scott and Lee counties, part of Wise County, and the city of Norton. He has served for a long time on the House committees on Courts of Justice, Labor and Commerce, and Rules. And in case you hadn't seen, on Sunday, he was just named the new majority leader for the Virginia House of Delegates. So he assures me all local government legislation is going to zip right through the House. So we got that covered. We're also lucky to have with us today Mr. Larry Roberts, who's the Executive Director of the Sorensen Institute for Political Leadership. Larry serves as the Executive Director, of the Sorensen Institute, which is an initiative of the University of Virginia and the Weldon Cooper Center for Public Service. It was first founded in 1993 with a mission of bringing together diverse individuals from varying backgrounds who all had a passion for politics and public service. Through various education programs and training programs, the Sorensen Institute seeks to strengthen and enhance the quality of governance and service at all levels of Virginia government and help restore public confidence and trust in our political system. Prior to joining the Sorensen Institute, Larry held a number of senior roles in Virginia government, including Chief of Staff to Lieutenant Governor Fairfax and Counselor to Governor Kane. In addition to working in government and politics, Larry's also been a very successful attorney, having worked in private practice for more than 20 years and holding partnerships with Skadden, Davis Wright, Tremaine, and Venable. So Larry and Terry, thank you so much for joining us. We're eager to hear your thoughts.
Thank you, Chris. Is this mic working? No? Closer? All right. So first of all, I want to congratulate Chris, who is a graduate 2020 Political Leaders Program from the Sorensen Institute. And Chris's class has the distinction of being the longest class ever because we started right before the governor issued his shutdown order. We switched to virtual for a few months, went back to in-person, then brought them back this year to experience some of the regions that they were only able to visit virtually. So it was an 18-month long class, and Chris was one of the great members of that class, and really remarkable how you all adjusted to the back and forth, and we appreciated your flexibility. I think that Delegate Kilgore may have the record for having spoken to the Sorensen Institute more times than any other speaker in our history. We do go to Southwest Virginia, real Southwest, not just Roanoke, with our classes every year. And Delegate Kilgore, whether he's in the majority or the minority, is always an interesting and informative speaker for our class participants. Chris did a good job of describing the Sorensen Institute's mission. We are all about trying to bring people together to build more effective leadership. You know, a lot of people think we're just here to train elected officials. That is not the case. We are trying to build civic engagement, people in the community who want to engage the process constructively, people who want to learn more about the Commonwealth, more about people that are not like them, and to elevate the dialogue that we have inside the legislature, inside the governor's office, and in communities around the state. We do that through 5 programs. With high school students, with college students, with candidates who want to train to run for office. And we're a unique candidate training program in that we are a bipartisan program. So we have people from both parties and independents participating. We also have speakers and experts from both parties who join the class to offer their expertise. So In case you haven't noticed it, Republicans and Democrats run different kinds of campaigns. And so their consultants actually bring different points of view about how you can be successful as a candidate, and we find that valuable. We have an emerging leaders program, which actually was the brainchild of Governor Bob McDonald, to train people in their 20s, early 30s who want to do a deep dive into the public policy process. He came to us with the idea, I'd like to train the young people in my administration about how this stuff actually works. And we said, well, we can't do a one-party program, but if you're okay with it, we'll invite people from both parties. And so we're really proud of that program. And then our political leaders program is 10 months. We go to 9 different regions of the Commonwealth. Many local elected officials and administrators have spoken to our programs over the years. And we build cohorts that are diverse: age, gender, race, ethnicity, region, political viewpoints. And we really try to bring together 35 or so people from around the Commonwealth to come together and see if they can't find ways to bridge the various gaps. So, we're really proud that we think we are putting into the ecosphere about 120 to 150 people every year who really are going back out into the communities of Virginia with this notion that it doesn't have to be a binary choice. Somebody doesn't have to be right and somebody doesn't have to be wrong at all times. So I'll just mention a couple of quotes because I really want to get to your questions. But one of my favorites is the author H.G. Wells, and he was corresponding with the author James Joyce. I think it might have been about Finian's Rainbow, but Wells was telling Joyce all the things that were wrong with Joyce's book. But at the end of his letter to Joyce, he said, but the world is wide and there is room for both of us to be wrong. So that's been sort of a thing that I've taken through my life. I may think I'm right, but it's possible that I'm wrong. John Kennedy had a quote, we the people are the boss, and we will get the kind of political leadership, be it good or bad, that we demand and deserve. And that isn't something that we really talk to our participants in our programs about, that we have to expect better from our politics, from our governing, from our elected officials, from our unelected leaders. I would say 75% of Americans are frustrated with the state of our politics and governing, that it is too divisive. And they want the parties to try to find, not check your ideals or check your policy views at the door, but at least listen to the other side and try to engage and see if there are things that we can do to improve the day-to-day lives of Americans. And so, we do tell our folks, you need to go out, whether you run for office or not is irrelevant to us, but you need to go out and expect more. Expect different, expect better, express your views, tell people you want something different than this divisive tenor that we have in our politics. And the last is a Japanese scholar, Daisaku Ikeda, where there's an absence of political leadership, civil society should step in to fill the gap, providing the energy and vision needed to move the world in a new and better direction. So, I do think, present company excluded, that there is a growing disconnect between the governing class and the day-to-day residents of our country and of our Commonwealth. And I know Delegate Kilgore, very brilliant legislator, but has never lost that common touch and that sense of decency. I know when I was in the governor's office serving a Democratic governor, we could always rely on Delegate Kilgore to have a conversation. And he might agree with us or he might not agree with us, but he would tell us what he thought and we would tell him what we thought, and you could move forward. There were other delegates and senators from both parties that we couldn't get a straight story from. And it just makes it very hard to do public policy when you're trying to, deal with people that are trying to game the system, game you, instead of just having an open and honest and forthright dialogue. So again, Sorensen is not about just helping people to run for office, and we're not about kumbaya around the campfire. we do expect people to come to our programs with, fairly defined political views, fairly defined cultural views. That's fine, but you do learn to listen empathetically to people that are not like you, and people are always surprised in our programs how much they have in common with people that they never would have expected to be able to strike up a friendship. And so, that's our goal, is to depolarize Virginia, to build a sense of common purpose, and to send those ambassadors out into the community and hopefully convert some more people to bipartisanship, ethics, and effective leadership. But I will say, in turning the mic over to Delegate Kilgore, I feel I come from the Democratic side. I lost a little sleep on November 2nd. Yeah, totally different reasons. I have left partisanship. I am now a bipartisan, nonpartisan person, and have brought a lot more Republicans into the program, and I expect we'll see some more now. But I really have appreciated the work that you've done, even in difficult political times, not only to speak to our programs, but to help us line up the right speakers and to learn a whole lot about your region of the state and your views, which are not doctrinaire, which we also appreciate. So thank you.
Thank you. It's always good to appear with Larry and especially talk to the Sorensen group. The Sorensen group, it is a very diverse group, and they come down to Southwest Virginia, real Southwest Virginia, every year, and we show them around. They get to see what's going on in far Southwest Virginia, and we really appreciate being able to talk to them. Yeah, I got elected in 1993. And when I went to the General Assembly, I was the only Republican down in Western Virginia. And I would be riding on the plane every week with all the Democrats. We'd be riding back and forth. That's when we took the plane down there. And I'd be sitting there. They'd say, well, Terry, you go back there and sit. We got some things to discuss. I mean, which, I would do that. And but the key thing about back then, we all got along. We met, the Southwest delegation. We'd meet weekly, maybe, and sometimes twice a week. And it was, when I first went to the General Assembly, it was more about where you're from, on how you voted. We voted with a lot of, if you looked at my voting record back then, I probably voted more with Dickie Cranwell than I did with some Republicans in Northern Virginia, because we agreed on what we needed to do for rural Virginia. More than that. Well, I can't say that's the way it is today, because everybody's divided up into parties, and everybody's divided up into block voting and things of that nature, which really sometimes hurts the process. And, I found out over the years that rural Virginia, especially the more rural you are, we have a lot more in common with the urban areas of the state. If you look at demographics, if you look at educational attainment, if you look at access to medical care, access to broadband, et cetera, you have a lot more in common with folks who represent the more urban areas. And we've tried in Southwest to get with those individuals, get with individuals who represents the cities, and try to form coalitions to move ideals forward that would help both. And I think that's what we need to do. Now, how many in here thinks politics is fun anymore? Probably not many. Some okay. Some may think it's fun, but it's I can take on Twitter and Facebook people going after me all the time. But now my wife, she gets a little bit upset. My mother really gets upset if she sees something about me. She still reads that, and I tell her not to believe half of that stuff. But the bad half. But politics isn't fun anymore. We've quit talking to each other. So that's the problem that I have with this whole system that we have right now. We quit talking to each other. We're going for the sound bites. We're going for the what sounds good on Twitter, what sounds good on Facebook. I'm going to share this against this person or that person. One thing that back when Governor Northam and all that, they were going through all that, I did not say one word about anybody because there's nothing to be gained from me saying anything about anybody. We all make mistakes. Everything, everybody makes mistakes. Everybody just needs to step back and take it for what it is and move on. And that's the way I looked at it. And a lot of folks didn't, but I think that we as a society, we has folks involved in politics, and you as leaders need to have more of a, communication with the other side, with folks folks you disagree with. I mean, I try to go out to dinner with folks on the other side, try to get to know them, try to at least see where they're coming from, see what's interested in them. And you'll find out, as Larry said, you'll find out that a lot of times you're more alike than you are opposite when it comes right down to it. I see Emmett Hanger back there. He's Senator Hanger. He's one of the nicest guys in the legislature. If you can't sit down and talk to Emmett Hanger, then you probably don't need to be in the legislature because he's very easy to talk to. Even Emmett and I, we don't agree on everything, but we are nice to each other, and that's what everyone. I think the society would be a lot better off if people stake their ground out. So I'm not asking anybody to give up what they believe in, but at least stake your ground out and have those conversations with folks. In Virginia, we have to balance a budget. We can't spend like Washington does. I mean, I'm sure we'd like to sometimes. We can't just spend and spend and spend. We got to balance that budget. We've got to reach some agreements, and sometimes those agreements take a little bit longer than we want them to. But, since I've been there, we've always got it done eventually. I mean, it may be late in the game, but we eventually come together, decide what's best for Virginia, and try to move forward. And I think that's what's wrong with our federal government, that it's now become when you can sit on the floor of the House and make speeches all day long and go after people all day long, then you're not going to be able to work with those people you go after. I mean, it just makes sense. If you continually harass somebody, they're not going to work with you. That's what we need to find out. And in my role, that's one reason that I decided to pursue the majority leader, is we don't need to be throwing bombs every day. We need to stake our grounds out, but we need to work with the other side to try to make Virginia a better place to live and work and raise a family. That's what we need to do. That's what politics should be about. It shouldn't be about, this is our flag, we're going to do this. This is our flag, we're going to do that. But, and also let me encourage you, leadership is so important. You all are in roles in county government where you lead every day, where you set examples every day. If you're there arguing on the public TV every evening, every time you meet about this or that, then that's going to put a sour taste in your constituents' mouths. And they're and try to work things out. Try to get things moving for your locality. Try to encourage others to get involved in leadership. Larry and his group are, with the younger going back into the high schools and to the colleges and getting folks interested in leadership is very important. I know, especially for areas that are rural, we lose a lot of our best and brightest each year. Once they go off to college, you never see them again. And we need to work out ways to get those folks back, whether that's economic development, creating jobs. But in order to do that, we got to have leadership. We got to have folks that are willing to step up, take the challenge, and do what they need to do to advance their locality. But I've probably said enough, but things are a lot different than they were in '93 when I got elected. We didn't have Twitter, didn't have Facebook, didn't have cell phones. You sit there on the floor, you'd write up everything. Now you have to do everything on computers. I remember sitting there many times trying to write an amendment on the floor, and the bill would be done before I could get it written up. So, and I'd say, well, maybe I can try it in the Senate. But, back in the days when I first got there, it was a tough and rumble. I mean, had Hunter Andrews and Dickie Cranwell and Tom Moss and all the folks there. But we all got together at the end. We all love Virginia. We all moved it forward and tried to pay it forward for the Commonwealth. But just I encourage you to be civil, to lead by example. That's what I want to leave with you. So turn it back over to Larry.
Yeah, just one thing about leadership. I mentioned this in a luncheon that some of you were at, but one of the great examples of political leadership that I saw was in the aftermath of the tragedy at Virginia Tech in 2007. And there was a determined effort on the part of top leaders in the state not to politicize that situation. President Bush reached out to Governor Kane, who was coming back, as you may recall, from Japan, where he was on a trade mission, and offered the services of Air Force One for Governor Kane to be able to get to Virginia Tech in time for the convocation the day after. And so the two, Laura, Ann Holton, President Bush, and Kane flew down on Air Force One and had a chance to talk about what they wanted to say at Virginia Tech that day. It was a bipartisan, important message. A couple days later, we did an event at Monroe Square in Richmond with the Republican Lieutenant Governor Bill Bolling and the Republican Attorney General Bob McDonald, the Democratic Governor Tim Kaine. The purpose was, and this was broadcast on TV stations around the state, the purpose was to show that there was no separation in leadership across the party lines. The independent review panel that was appointed to review what happened at Virginia Tech and present recommendations to the legislature and the governor was bipartisan. Bill Leidy, the chief of staff, was keeping the congressional delegation, which was majority Republican at that time, and the legislative leadership aware of everything that we were doing, was open to whatever questions they might have. That tragedy never became politicized. It never became partisan. Many of the recommendations that were reported to the governor and the legislature were passed, including a gun bill that passed virtually unanimously. It was a technical bill about a loophole in the federal reporting system, so it was not a gun control bill. But still, any gun legislation is difficult in those circumstances, and Governor Kane and Attorney General McDonald worked very closely together on making that happen along with the staff. So, leadership does matter. Other tragedies have been politicized, and constituents respond to that. Most Virginians came together in the wake of Virginia Tech, and unfortunately in other tragedies that we see now, those lessons are lost, but it's not like they can't happen even in this difficult environment if political leaders want to lead all of the people.
Hey, Larry, that's good. I remember Governor Kane reaching out to legislators. He called me about that tragedy, and it was agreed that nobody was going to try to politicize that. But let me just say, Tim Kaine and Mark Warner, your two senators, I go talk to them. I sit down and talk to them. They're two of the nicest individuals you ever meet. We don't agree on everything, but we do agree about moving Southwest Virginia forward. We do agree about what needs to happen in rural Virginia. We talked about the infrastructure bill that was going forward and what needed to be addressed as far as rural Virginia is concerned. And Billy, I did mention 81, so don't worry about that. 81 was mentioned, but sitting down. I encourage anyone to sit down and talk to your congressional leaders, your senators, your governor. No matter whether you're in the same party or not, you're all public servants. You're all there to serve. Just because a person is of a different political party does not mean that you shouldn't sit down with them, talk with them. I remember one time Tim Kaine flew down to Abington just to have dinner with me to sit and talk about legislation coming up. That was really impressive that he would fly down and talk to me about what was coming up during the General Assembly session. So that's what you have to do if you want to be successful. That's what you have to do.
Yeah, most people would not know. Tim was the mayor of Richmond, urban area. His father-in-law was a fairly liberal Republican governor, but not many people know that Linwood Holton came from Big Stone Gap. And so Kane always had an affinity for Southwest Virginia issues.
Joey, let me start off with a question before we turn it over to the audience. We spent some time this morning in our general session talking about the way it did. But I think one thing that everyone's heard, seen, even in their local words, is that local and state politics have grown increasingly nationalized. National issues are constantly being talked about school boards, town houses, and it's the state house. And I was wondering if y'all had any thoughts about how to kind of push back. We've all heard Tip O'Neill say we've seen kind of a dramatic departure from that last.
Well, I mean, what we on our side, on the Republican side, basically, we tell all our incumbents, all our folks, the main thing that you can do is keep your eye on the ball. Keeping your eye on the ball is calling back your supervisors, talking to your boards, talking to your town councils and your sheriffs and everybody, making sure that you keep that fire burning at home. We stress that year in, year out, going to the football games, going to the PTAs. Sometimes it can get brutal when you go and start taking questions at some of those meetings, but it shows that you will show up. I think that's how you keep things more localized. And now it's hard, I know my constituents, I know who they are, I know who their mom was or dad was if I see them out there. And that's not the way it is in Fairfax County. That's not the way it is in Northern Virginia. People are moving in, moving out all the time. We're in rural Virginia, we're not really that way. So we have a better way of knowing our constituents. But Larry,
Yeah, I think it starts with each of us. We have to decide, do we want to further exacerbate divisions in our society, or do we want to try to bring people together? And what I see too often is people want to, stoke that fire and then step back and say, well, that's not me. That's my crazy constituents. Well, no, you're the leader. You're setting the tone. If these things are happening in school board meetings in your towns or at city council meetings and things are getting inflamed in the community, I think you as a political leader have an obligation to try to defuse those tensions and not play them up for your own political gain. And it may sound naive, but I have seen it work. I have seen leaders who have worked through those situations, you've just got to look at what's the greater whole. We as a country are in a competitive global environment, and if Russia and China look at the United States and see Democrats and Republicans treating each other as the enemy, not the opponent, if they see, people hating on each other in our communities, we're doing their job for them. We need as a country to come together to compete in an increasingly competitive global economy, in an increasingly hostile global political environment. We should be the shining city on the hill that Ronald Reagan talked about, and we're far from that at the moment. This week on the grounds at the university, there was a premiere of a documentary called Common Grounds, and I hope you all will check it out. It was a group of UVA students who were brought together, the president of the Young Americans for Freedom. For those Democrats in the room, that's the conservative group on campus, and the Democratic Socialists of America president was part of the cohort as well. So they brought together eight or 10 students, very different political views, and brought them together with some issue prompt questions. And these students, despite their strong differences, were able to find that common humanity that drove them. Now, admittedly, this is a group of UVA students, a pretty exclusive club, but with very different views. But because they knew they were going to be producing a documentary, because they knew they had a community project they were going to do together, that bigger whole enabled them to look for ways to understand each other. So they were telling some really tough stories. They were not checking their beliefs at the door, but to understand, why is that person thinking that way, really gives you an opportunity to see that, our views aren't nearly as different as we think they are. And now that I'm in a nonpartisan position and I get to listen to Republicans and Democrats complain about each other, what's remarkable to me is that they have the same complaints about each other. It's like they don't see that, the thing that Republicans feel are awful about Democrats feel are awful about Republicans, and it's the same issue. Oh yeah, that side, they know how to play for keeps and we don't. And, they know how to come together and be unified and we don't. Like, guys, guys and gals, yeah, right. You both are not really serving the best interests of the Commonwealth when you're only looking at it through your own partisan lens.
This time I want to open up the floor for questions. We have a couple of mics in the middle here. If you have a question, I encourage you to come forward, state your name, your county, and ask away.
Penny Gross, Fairfax County, and a former VACO president. And I want to first of all put in a pitch for VACO, because if you are attending a VACO event or you're especially on the board of directors, which covers the entire Commonwealth, you find very quickly that there are a lot of things you agree on. And I remember a long time ago when Fairfax County, Billy, you may remember this, when Fairfax County decided we would support one of the farm bills. It solidified a friendship that's gone on for a quarter of a century. And yes, and so there are some real values to our governance by participating in VACO. So I want to make that point. But the question really is that I would like to make is, our democratic ideals, small d democratic ideals, and the basis of this nation were founded right here in Virginia. And yet democracy is under attack. Democracy is in danger. We're talking about the death of democracy. I'd like to hear from you all what you see, because I know from a local level, it's a serious issue. I am terrified, quite frankly, that I will see the death of democracy in my lifetime, and that does not give me any warm fuzzies. So could you talk a little bit about what you see? And let's just focus on Virginia rather than looking at the national part. If we need to fix it here first and educate our constituents about, what democracy really is and what it isn't.
Well,
Thank
thank you for your service, and thank you for your service to VACO as well. Penny, you and I have worked together on some things over the years, and you've always been a calm and level-headed person in government, which I appreciate. And I should mention Dean Lynch with VACO is also a Sorensen alum, and very appreciative of his leadership in the Commonwealth. We certainly, when I was in the governor's office, we worked closely with local elected officials across the aisle, independent local officials, Democratic and Republican. And, I will say that transportation funding is an example where the two parties acted as though they were on completely different planets. But at the end of the day, Tim Kaine pushed it for years. He brought in the local elected officials to try to convince the General Assembly. Bob McDonald, took it up. Speaker Howe, who'd been our adversary on that, but worked with us on countless other issues. He introduced the bill for the transportation funding package that, was an improved version of what Kaine had put forward. If you just looked at the beginning of that process and listened to Democrats and Republicans talk in the General Assembly, talk about how, they were in pitched camps, and yet at the end of the day, Republicans passed a bill that looked, with some improvements that Governor McDonald put in, looked largely like our bill. I mean, it does show you that the rhetoric gets out of hand, and that the focus on results at the end of the day is what's important. As far as the democracy, I think people do have to talk to each other. We in Virginia should be leaders. You alluded to 4 out of the first 5 presidents of the United States who set most of the protocols for our nation were Virginians. But what's happening now is that people are saying the same things and meaning completely different things, and they need to sit down together and talk. One of the things about democracy is voting rights. Democrats have a view that Republicans are trying to skew the electorate to ensure that they will maintain power forever, and they're doing it in a racially discriminatory way. Republicans feel that their constituents and really most Virginians agree that one person should have one vote and that a person should need to provide some form of proof that they are that person. I can't for the life of me understand why the two parties can't get together and figure this out. There are legitimate points of view on both sides. And I don't want to sound like Donald Trump after Charlottesville, but there are legitimate points of view on both sides. But when one party does decide that, they're going to adopt voting rights legislation that consciously excludes certain people from the process, and the other side wants to argue that there's no threat of fraud ever in our elections, really looking at it and saying, how do we ensure that the most number of people who are eligible to vote can vote? And so, there's plenty of common ground on how do we get IDs for people that don't have IDs. There's common ground on the benefits of early voting. We saw Glenn Youngkin embrace early voting and decide that that was a way to get a path to victory, and it turned out he was right. The death of democracy, I'm not poo-pooing it. I understand what we are seeing, is really dangerous. But I think when we just attribute that to one personality or to one party, and not look ourselves in the mirror every day and say, what are we doing to promote democracy? It's not enough to point fingers at the other people and say, they're the bad people. Each of us has a role to play. And the students at UVA the other night, I thought this was incredibly insightful for a 20-year-old. The president of the Young Americans for Freedom, he said, look, I'm a conservative. I'm happy about some things that are happening in the country. I'm not happy about others, but I look at myself every day in the mirror and say, am I contributing to a better democracy? It has caused him to give up on some of the channels of communication that he had been pursuing because he felt that it was counterproductive and wasn't really conservative. We all have to look at ourselves. We all have a role to play in making sure that our democracy is not as fragile as it sometimes appears. And I think the last thing I'll say is, again, not to downplay it, but I think every generation faces a democratic crisis. If you look at the footage from the New Deal, people were calling Franklin Roosevelt socialist, a warmonger. There was a strong sentiment that we should stay out of World War II, and it wouldn't be so bad if Germany took over all of Europe. We tend to think of what we're dealing with as the worst thing ever. There was a civil war. There was a Great Depression where demagogues were all over the place. If you look in the political environment of the 1930s, worse than the demagogues we see today, and with bigger followings. So, each generation has this sort of crisis. I don't want to underplay it, but I think we have to do this as individuals. There's not going to be some, magic solution other than possibly, a major war. But, would the planet even survive a major war in today's day and age?
Penny, thank you for your question on democracy. And I agree a lot with what Larry said. I think the problem we have now is we got this 24-hour news cycle that has to just tell everything is so bad, everything is so terrible. depending on, whether Obama's in office or Trump's in office, and now Biden's in office, everybody's just, all the talking heads are on there every night just telling you how bad everything is. And heck, no wonder you go to bed feeling depressed and taking sleeping pills and things like that to get to sleep. Democracy, I think, does work in Virginia, as Larry noted about the transportation. And we had that big fight for a few years there on Medicaid expansion and whether we was going to expand Medicaid or not. And a few people I know switched sides there and decided that we needed to go forward with Medicaid expansion and go forward. But I think it's alive and well. But let me just say, what y'all do here at VACO is really great, bringing people together from different size counties, different views or different worldviews, and trying to get them together. The reason you're able to successful, Dean Lynch is from Scott County. An old Gate City boy grew up, used to kill me in football practice every day. And that's why it's working so well, because he's trying to just get everybody around the table together and try to get to where we need to go. But no, thanks to VACO for all they do and coming up with ways to move the counties forward and move your legislation forward. Because I know when y'all speak, a lot of folks listen. We'll be sitting there a lot of times. Well, VACO has said this, and you're trying to look for your book and trying to figure out, okay, what did they say? And I'll just text it and say, okay, what's the deal here? But we appreciate all that they do, and believe me, they're around working the halls every day trying to see what's going on over there. They know about it quicker than we do most of the time. So thank you, Dean.
I want to give a shout out to my UVA colleague, Charles Hartgrove, who's in the audience, who's also from Gate City.
Yes.
So,
I'm Billy Collier from Rockingham County, and I couldn't help but stand up and say something. As a retired professional educator for 30 years in the social science area, got taught government, AP government. I think what's critical to remember here is this nation has been through dark hours before, and we have found the light. And it's not because we haven't found the light because of one individual party or one individual person. It's because we've collectively come together and said, we're tired of this. It's time to move forward and find the common ground again. The framers of the Constitution were very wise men. And they were so wise that in the very first sentence of the Constitution, they said, we the people, in order to form a more perfect union. And that word more is very important to understand. They realized that in our human inequity, we could never be perfect, but we must strive to find perfection. And in that, it would be a lot of failures and a lot of gives and takes, but we did it. I believe it was James Madison that wrote, the government is but a mere reflection of the people. Let us remind ourselves that if we like government, look in the mirror and pat yourself on the back. If you're not happy with government, look in the mirror and say, shame on you. Government is the people in this country. In this grand experiment, I am hopeful will stand strong. I spent 30 years teaching many young people that very concept every day of my life and believing it. And I think there have been, this nation's cemeteries are full of over 600,000 Americans who have laid their lives down for that very, very belief. And if we should fail, shame on us.
yeah, thank you for that sentiment. I would just add that we do have to find a common purpose, perhaps thinking about our veterans and those who've lost our lives as a way to reground ourselves in that need. But, from my vantage point now, again, as a nonpartisan, what I see are both political parties acting as though they have a mandate. When they eke out a victory and get into power, they act as though, acting for my 50.5% of the people is what we need is best for the country. And, the other side is irrelevant. If you think about it, our country is basically split 50-50. Individual states are different, individual legislative districts are different, but as far as our society as a whole, basically split down the middle. And consultants are making millions of dollars figuring out how to appeal to a very narrow slice of the electorate that is persuadable to switch, from one party to the other in a given election, or to goose turnout for one party just a little bit more. But if we're going to come together as a country, we have to stop looking at, can we eke out narrow victories and govern, as though we had an 80% vote, and figure out how we're going to, build the coalitions across regions, across parties, across races. And I will say just, one other thing about your comment about the first line of the Constitution. I do think that word "more perfect union" is important. We don't get it right. History will judge whether our generation did a good job or not a good job. But there were people left behind at the time the union was founded. And part of being a more perfect union is getting outside ourselves and thinking about the people that don't have the opportunities that we have. And this is not just one race or another, or one ethnicity or another, but we constantly have to think about, how do we make this a more perfect union for more people in our society? And it was convenient at a time when the founding fathers were there. Landed white males were the only people engaged in government. We're moving toward a multicultural democracy. There are really important issues for us to be considering about how does a multicultural democracy work, and instead, we're spending a bunch of time just spitting at each other. So
that's right. I mean, I also was over the campaigns this year, and I quickly figured out that you're only playing in these close districts to about 2,000 people. Your message is for 2,000 people. You're going to get, the R's are going to get those on this side, the D's are going to get those on theirs, and we just had to, we had to say, okay, we're going to hit these 2,000 people. We got to hit them 7 times. And one of my candidates said, hey, they told me not to come back anymore. Some lady told me, she said, don't come back here anymore. I said, oh, well, I hope you got that vote. But that's just the way it's broken down in society. And as Larry says, it's a 50-50 society right now, basically. And a lot of folks, kept saying Virginia was this, Virginia that. But, all in all, we're still a society where it's 50-50, and it may be different down my way than it is in Fairfax or Loudon or wherever, but it's still 50-50 if you take everything together.
Thank you. So I really appreciate it. I view this as a support group. I'll just say it's part of the reason I love the company. I did it as a school board member. I love it because so we're the choir. And we're preaching to each other, and it really is helpful. And Penny is right. I mean, there's a lot that happens here that strengthens for going out. Yeah, it's like church. It feels good. I think I'd like to talk a little bit about deterrence and incentives. So all that 50-50 split, it means we got to talk to each other. And I think what I'm hearing from your stories and everything is it happens when you get to know each other and really talk to each other. So we come together here, and then we go back to our place. I go up to Arlington, Virginia, and I don't talk to a lot of Republicans. There are some there. And actually, there are. And actually, I did get kicked out of the local party for a while. So I've got my bona fides for being, bipartisan. Larry knows well. I did it. We would argue about this for all the right reasons, because I did right by my county and they put me back in office, I think, because of it. It was hard. So, I mean, there's some deterrence for actually trying to reach across the aisle. I've seen people try to do it. Sam Razul is a delegate that comes up, and he is really good about talking that line. And he has to play it safe in Arlington, because if he goes too far, people are going to be angry because they want that red meat. And that both sides, Democrats and Republicans, the same thing. All right, so can you all think of some incentives and some deterrents that we and you or whatever could do? So I will suggest, I would love, I've been trying to figure out for a long time, to sit down and actually get to know some folks who don't think like me, who are different. I love to do this. How do I do it? Do I just go, okay, so you're a real rabid Republican. Will you sit down with me? I mean, how do I find these people? How do I talk to them? How do I talk?
You sit down with her.
Yeah. But I'm thinking maybe hosting some of you all, maybe Sorensen could do that. Get regular people talking to each other. I'd love to invite some folks up to Arlington, share a meal, show them around. I did that with our sister cities in Europe. They come over. I give them a good time, show them around. They love it. I'd love to do that with my fellow Virginians if I could, but I'm not sure how to do that. So I'm asking for help on that. And then the deterrence. I mean, I will say, I think it is we the people, but the people need to be led, Billy, I think. So if we're going to lead, if we just stand back and throw things that they don't know where to go, how are we going to lead them and talk to them? So I have found sometimes my fellow Democrats will do a little ping back, and I can see for all those people, it just pushes them away because we don't look good. We look arrogant. We look what, and I mean, I think both sides do that. So I have tried very gently sometimes to kind of call my fellow Democrat. And I said, you might have said that a little differently, or you might do this a little differently. I try to do it very carefully because people don't like to I sometimes fail at being careful. But anyway, there's some things like that where we could actually deter whoever, whether we're Republican or Democrat, people, our own people, from throwing the bombs too much. And they don't like to hear it. And neither do our voters. They don't like to hear it too much either. But I think we can do that. So anyway, I've just gone on and on. I would love to hear you all talk about some incentives and deterrence that we could do other than just, preaching to the choir and thank you. I do. It has been a nice service. Thank you.
So there's a member of the General Assembly who will go nameless, who in person, very easy to deal with. Again, somebody who has very strong political views, not easy to get to support legislation on the other side, but very easy to talk to and work with, reasonable person. This elected official's Facebook page, is being run by consultants, and it is just vitriol, 24/7 about the other side. Otherwise, you were worried, right? Yeah. So, I think it comes down to whether people really want to solve this problem. It's easier to just bash the other side. There are resources out there. There's a group called Braver Angels that tries to bring people together to have conversations. There are mediation services that are out there. This Common Grounds that I mentioned at UVA, they are setting up a program where college students across Virginia can sign up to have a one-on-one conversation with someone whose political beliefs are on the other side. But the state bar had a program that I participated in last year. It's the desire to want to use it, and the officials having awareness of those resources that are out there. I mean, we have cohorts of 150 people a year. I don't pretend that I'm solving society's ills with 150 people, but I am sending 150 ambassadors out into the world who have this point of view that we can work together, even with people that are very much unlike us. And, I have to hope that has that, Bobby Kennedy quoted someone about the throwing a stone in the pond and the ripple effect of doing the right thing. So, I would say don't despair. There are resources. Sorensen is very happy to work with people, who want to try to find ways to move forward together. But I think it's will and it's information, and there are a lot of programs out there that are trying to do what we do.
I tell you, one of the biggest, I guess, pluses that I've had serving in the General Assembly is some of the trips that we take to other parts of the state to find out what's going on in that other part of the state. We recently just hosted the Senate Finance Committee down Airway, and hope that we were able to impress upon them our needs and our pluses, what we're good at down in Southwest Virginia. And I think that would be a great opportunity, Dean, for y'all to get together and come up with a way for some of your localities to visit other localities and see what I'm sure board meetings in Fairfax are a lot different than board meetings in Scott County or Wise County. I mean, I just think it would be a good opportunity, and issues are a lot different, obviously, between those two places. But, we just have to, as Larry said, we just have to try to figure out what is going on. But you have to remember that each party is run by people who show up. Each political party is run by who shows up, okay? And a lot of times those who show up are on the extreme side of each party. So that's the crux that you're dealing with when you're in politics. You are answering those questions as to this or that, some far right or some far left. Somebody wants to do something far left on our side, they want to do something far right. And it's our goal or our objective as legislators. Well, we only deal, and I've had this conversation yesterday in my caucus meeting. We're only dealing with what we can pass the Senate with, what we can deal with the Senate with. So, I mean, that's where we start from this year. And that's how we have to move forward. I mean, it's great to say that we're going to do this, this, and this. Well, you're not going to do this, this, and this if you don't get 21 votes in the Senate. So that's where you have to draw the line and try to move it forward.
Can I just mention for the question, when we go to Southwest Virginia, a lot of people are going to Southwest Virginia in our program for the first time in their lives, and they have a perception that Southwest Virginia is on hard times, so they want the state to bail them out. And, they're just, rock-ribbed conservatives that agree in lockstep on every issue. And what we always learn when we go down there is that there is a strong pride in Southwest Virginia on the things that are done very well in Southwest Virginia, education being one of those, and that the issues don't break down on a partisan basis a lot of times, even though that's a very red part of the state. Now it used to be a very blue part of the state, but you have different issues than Delegate O'Quinn, than the Senator, Senator Pillion. It's more about the local concerns, than it is about, I'm always going to vote, this particular way because that's what my national party tells me to do. So
we do want your money.
Yep. And
did you hear that? We do want the money.
And when broadband, makes Southwest the dreamland, Fairfax is going to want your money.
That's right. That's right.
Dean Rogers, Amherst County. I'm going to ask you to step outside the box for a minute.
Okay.
Because we've all been raised on the assumption that the two-party system makes sense. It's how you get a majority. But we're at the point now to where we're arguing over 0.5%. We're moving to completely different states to affect those percents or to live where we want to live. We can't reach agreement. We don't talk across the aisle. And all elements of media seem to help facilitate that and make it worse. Is it time for the rise of a third party that might broker between the two and break the logjam of dialogue?
Well, I will first say that this year's Political Leaders Program visited Lynchburg, and I had a chance after the session was over to spend some time in Amherst, and thank you for your service there. The American system makes it very hard for a third party to gain traction. There are such inordinate resources tied to both of the political parties that, I think that's going to be a hard thing. Third party voters do often influence elections in ways that people don't really focus on. So Governor McAuliffe won in part because there was third party vote that drained some votes from the Republicans. The same thing has happened. Some people think that Youngkin won in part because of some third party voting that went on. So I don't see it. I'm not opposed to it. But if you look at the democracies around the world that are multi-party democracies, I'm not sure that those are any more stable than what we have now. So I think as a practical matter, it'd be really tough. But I think that you could see a time in our lifetimes that one of the parties implodes and a different party comes forward. So how's that for controversy?
That's good. I like it. This will be our last question. Okay, thanks.
Both parties have a concern that there is a significant loss from the citizens in the faith in their governments to do anything. And I think this should affect both parties. That people don't think that government can function. Yet there are many areas where both parties work together and accomplish something useful to the citizens. But that's not what gets the focus. The focus seems to be on those areas where there are large differences. And I'm not sure how you can, but if you can find ways to focus on what you do together and accomplish together and try to build more trust in the functioning of government, no matter which party's in charge. And I think that's one of the things that if we can do that, you might help the whole process just so that people feel comfortable with their government.
Yeah, that's great, but you know, people don't watch good news, and that's the problem. That's the problem you have. You know, arguments sell. You know, people want to watch people going after each other on TV, and people want to watch this senator going against this senator, or that congressman going against that congressman. But you're right. There's a lot of good going on out there. There's a lot of assistance that the federal governments give back to our localities. One that I always talk about is the Appalachian Regional Commission. And they do a great job for the Appalachian region of the United States. And had a great opportunity to meet with Mrs. Manchin, Joe Manchin's wife, who's now the head of Appalachian Regional Commission, and they really get what's going on in rural Appalachian, in the rural Appalachian Mountains, and this infrastructure bill gave them a lot more money. So those are good stories. Broadband's a good story. You know, what we're doing in broadband, Virginia just put out, you know, what, $750 million for broadband. I mean, that's a great news story. Of course, we didn't talk about that during the election, but you know, you might have talked about it every once in a while, but not a lot. So I agree with you. We do need to talk about what's going on. Great. We encourage all our legislators. I'm sure the Democrats encourage their legislators to get out and talk about what's going on, that how government has helped you.
Yeah, I'll just say very briefly that this dysfunction is going to be solved community by community. And so, you know, part of it is on our community leaders to counter program against people sitting at home, you know, wallowing in social media and their favorite cable, you know, news channel. You know, are we doing enough in our community to create community events that have the attractiveness to bring people together and feel that sense of community? I mean, this is, we are humans. This is a human political system. You know, it's not going to be solved by social media. It's not going to be solved by mass media. It's going to be solved town by town, community by community, with leaders who are willing to get out there and say, it's more important that my community get along than that we are at each other's throats.
And be nice. Be nice to each other. That's the main thing. Just be nice, smile, talk. I mean, you know, you can tell somebody no with a smile, they feel a lot better about it. But that's what I would tell you.
Well, there you say, you know, I'm often concerned with that. It's not about brand. It's how you would have made that extra. Really, you build your career. We certainly appreciate the applause today. If you all give a round of applause.
Thank you all for coming.